It was supposed to be a quiet evening, the kind I'd grown used to as the night custodian at Northbridge High. The school emptied out after the final bell, leaving the halls eerily quiet. I liked the solitude, found peace in the silence as I swept floors and locked up. But that night, something felt wrong. I was finishing my rounds when I noticed it, a faint glow seeping from under the door of room 303, the old history classroom on the third floor. The school was supposed to be empty, yet the light beckoned me, cutting through the darkness like an open wound. My first thought was that maybe a teacher had left a light on or some kid had stayed late. But when I knocked on the door, there was no answer. A shiver crept down my spine, but I pushed it aside. I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories, even though there were plenty about room 303. Rumors of strange noises, of whispers in the night, of things moving on their own. The kind of stories students spread to freak each other out. But as I turned the knob and pushed the door open, the room was empty. Empty, except for the glow. It was coming from the chalkboard, a strange, pulsing light, faint but undeniable. I stepped into the room, my heart beating louder than the sound of my boots against the worn tiles. As I moved closer, I saw them, symbols. Strange, intricate patterns scrawled across the board in white chalk, symbols I'd never seen before. They seemed to writhe under the glow, almost alive. I leaned in, squinting at the strange markings. My hand hovered over the chalkboard, my instincts screaming at me to turn around and leave. But something deeper pulled me forward, a curiosity I couldn't explain. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, soft and distorted, as though carried from a great distance. I whipped around, half expecting to see someone standing behind me. But there was no one. The room was dead silent. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I'd spent years working at this school, and never once had I felt this. Watched. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of disembodied voices filling the air. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. I backed towards the door, my eyes glued to the symbols. They seemed to throb, shifting in the glow, and as I stared at them, a cold realization set in. This was no prank. I ran. The next day, I told Mrs. Thompson about what I'd seen. She was the history teacher at Northbridge, and though she was polite enough, I could see the skepticism in her eyes. She smiled at me, reassuring, but I could tell she thought I'd imagined it all. Still, she said she'd look into it. A few days later, I saw her again. This time her face was pale, her eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in her before, fear. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pulled out an old, dusty journal from her bag and handed it to me. The leather cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. This belonged to a student who went here decades ago. I didn't want to know more, but she pressed on. His name was Samuel. He was obsessed with the occult, and according to this journal, he performed some sort of ritual in that very classroom, room 303. He wrote about symbols, the same ones you saw on the board, and his last entry, "It's a warning." I didn't want to believe her. It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a bad horror movie, but the way her hands trembled as she spoke told me she believed it. That night, after everyone had left, I found myself drawn back to room 303. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that much. But some part of me needed to see for myself, needed to know if what I'd experienced was real. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The room was just as I'd left it, dark, silent, but somehow colder. The symbols were back, glowing faintly on the chalkboard, their lines darker, more pronounced. They seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as though daring me to approach. Against my better judgment, I did. The temperature dropped, my breath coming out in visible puffs. A cold wind swept through the room, though the windows were closed, and then I heard it. A scream, high-pitched and agonizing. It echoed down the hallway, sending a wave of panic crashing over me. I turned and ran, my legs shaking beneath me, but as I reached the door, it slammed shut in my face. The whispers returned, louder now, filling my head with incoherent muttering. My heart raced, my hands frantically clawing at the door. I could feel something behind me, something watching, waiting. The air grew thick, oppressive, like I was drowning in the dark. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in that room. Minutes? Hours? But eventually the door swung open on its own and I bolted, not daring to look back. The next morning, Mrs. Thompson didn't show up for class. Her car was still in the parking lot, but no one had seen her. The police searched the school, combed through every room, every hallway, but she was gone. Vanished without a trace. And the symbols, they were gone too, wiped clean from the board, as if they had never been there. No one talks about room 303 anymore. It's been locked ever since, a padlock hanging from the door. But every so often when the halls are empty, I swear I hear it, the faintest whisper calling from within. I never believed in ghosts. At least I didn't until I took a janitorial job at Oakwood Academy. It was supposed to be a quiet gig, just sweeping and mopping the pristine halls of a prestigious all-girls school. But I quickly learned that the gymnasium held a dark secret, one that would shake my skepticism to its core. The first night I was assigned to the gym, I noticed something odd. The air felt heavy, thick with an unease that crawled under my skin. As I mopped the gleaming hardwood floors, the rhythmic squeaks of sneakers and thuds of basketballs echoed in my ears, lingering like ghosts of past games. I brushed off the discomfort, convincing myself it was just my imagination. It was late, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows across the court. I finished up, ready to head home, when I heard it, a faint sound, like the distant bounce of a basketball. My heart raced. Who could be playing at this hour? I stepped cautiously towards the sound, gripping my mop like a lifeline. The gym was empty, just the ghostly outlines of bleachers and the cold, still air. I switched on the lights, and the gym flooded with brightness. The bouncing stopped. In the center of the court, a basketball spun slowly, as if waiting for me to approach. I blinked, confusion washing over me. Had someone been here? The sensation of being watched prickled at my neck. I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears, and fled the gym, vowing never to return after dark. Days passed and whispers filled the school. Rumors of a ghost named Emily, a star athlete who had died tragically within these walls, permeated the halls. They said you could see her reflection in the gym mirrors, a fleeting image of sorrow. I rolled my eyes, dismissing it as teenage hysteria. But the stories persisted. One night, while cleaning up after a late basketball practice, I overheard a group of girls giggling nervously. "Did you hear her whisper my name?" one asked, her voice trembling. "I swear, it sounded just like her." The others nodded, fear etched on their faces. Curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I decided to investigate further. I returned to the gym the next evening, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a heavy heart. The air felt electric, alive with anticipation. I wasn't sure if I was looking for Emily, or simply trying to silence the doubts that haunted me. As I moved through the shadows, I could almost hear whispers swirling around me. names flitting by like shadows in the dark. I stood frozen, staring at the bleachers, half expecting Emily to materialize before me. My breath quickened, and I turned to leave. But then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic dribbling. I followed the sound, my heart pounding, and stepped onto the court. The basketball was gone. The silence was deafening, but then, just behind me, I felt a chill, like icy fingers brushing against my neck. Panic surged through me, and I spun around, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. No one was there. I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. The memories of the janitor's frantic escape echoed in my mind. I had to know the truth about Emily. What had happened to her? I returned to the gym a few nights later, this time with a group of friends, armed with flashlights and bravado. We dared each other to stay, hoping to capture something, anything, that would confirm the rumors. As we sat on the bleachers, the tension grew thick, palpable. Suddenly, the lights flickered. My friends exchanged uneasy glances, and I felt my heart leap into my throat. "Did you see that?" one of them whispered. I nodded, barely able to speak. Then, it happened. A soft whisper echoed through the gym, chilling us to the bone. "Help me." The voice was faint, a cry for assistance that sent shivers down my spine. We bolted up, our flashlights trembling in our hands. "Emily!" I shouted, not knowing why. My voice bounced off the walls, swallowed by the shadows. Silence fell. But then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the court, cloaked in darkness. Long flowing hair framed a pale face, her eyes hollow and haunting. My breath caught in my throat. "What do you want?" I dared to ask, my voice shaking. The figure stepped forward, and I felt a rush of cold air, as if the very essence of fear was breathing down my neck. She raised her hand, pointing towards the bleachers, and a low, anguished cry filled the air. I couldn't take it any more. We turned and ran, bursting through the gym doors and into the safety of the night. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Emily from my mind. I delved into the school's history and discovered the truth. A tragic accident during a basketball game years ago had claimed her life. The details were buried deep, but the spirit of Emily lingered, trapped in a gym where she had once shone brightly. I returned one final time, resolved to confront the specter that haunted Oakwood Academy. I entered the gym, heart pounding. "Emily," I called into the darkness, "I know what happened to you. I'm here to help." The air grew heavy, and I felt her presence, a sorrowful weight. "Please," I whispered, "you don't have to be alone." The lights flickered, and I caught a glimpse of her, sorrow etched on her face. The basketball appeared again, rolling slowly towards me. "Let me help you find peace," I begged. As the last word left my lips, the gym seemed to hold its breath. A warm breeze swept through, and for a fleeting moment I felt a sense of release. The lights steadied, and Emily's figure began to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. And then she was gone, leaving only silence in her wake. As I stepped out of the gym, the weight lifted from my shoulders. I could still hear the echoes of the past, but now they felt like distant memories, no longer filled with dread. I knew Emily was finally at peace, and perhaps so was Oakwood Academy. I never thought I'd find myself in the middle of a mystery, especially one that would chill the very core of Willow Creek High. My name is Mark, and I was just a regular student, caught up in the mundane routine of high school life. But everything changed the day Jason vanished. Jason was the kind of guy you hardly noticed. His quiet demeanor, always lost in a book, set him apart from the rest of us. I often wondered what went on in his mind, but I never dared to ask. One afternoon, as the final bell echoed through the hallways, I was packing my bag when I realized Jason hadn't left his seat. Curiosity piqued. I glanced back to see him still reading, oblivious to the world. "Hey, you coming?" I called out, but he didn't respond. I shrugged it off and headed for the exit. The school buzzed with chatter, but there was a strange heaviness in the air that day, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. Hours later, I heard the news. Jason was missing. The police were called. Search parties combed the area. But nothing. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery deepened, transforming into a macabre legend whispered among students. Some claimed he ran away, while others speculated he had fallen victim to something sinister within the school's walls. I couldn't help but feel the weight of those whispers. The school felt different now. An undercurrent of dread lingered in the air. As the days passed, I felt an inexplicable pull to the science lab where Jason had last been seen. Maybe it was guilt, or perhaps a desperate need for answers. One evening I slipped into the school, the dim lights flickering above, casting eerie shadows against the lockers. I knew I shouldn't be there, but something inside urged me forward. As I neared the science lab, a cold chill washed over me. I hesitated at the door, the handle cold beneath my palm. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in the oppressive silence. I pushed the door open, and the creak of the hinges felt like a scream in the stillness. The room was dim, cluttered with old equipment and dusty textbooks. My breath quickened as I scanned the room for any sign of Jason. And then I noticed it. A book, familiar yet foreign, lying open on a desk. It was Jason's favorite, the one he was always reading. I stepped closer, the chill deepening, and as I leaned in, the hairs on my neck prickled. Suddenly, a shadow flickered in my peripheral vision. I whipped around, my pulse racing, but there was nothing, only the lingering echo of my own breath. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the growing sense of dread. I turned back to the desk, but the book had vanished. Confusion turned to panic. Where had it gone? "Jason," I called, my voice trembling. Silence responded, thick and suffocating. I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but I stood my ground. If Jason were here, I had to find him. As I turned to leave, I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the room, cloaked in shadow. My stomach dropped. It felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. The figure was unmoving, its presence an oppressive weight that filled the space. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze bore into me, watching, waiting. "Is someone there?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The figure shifted, a subtle motion that sent my heart racing. I stumbled back, instinct kicking in, and grabbed for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I pressed my hands against the cold surface, panic surging through me. I could feel my pulse in my ears, drowning out all rational thought. "Let me out," I shouted, pounding on the door. But the figure moved closer, gliding silently across the floor, its presence growing more menacing with each passing second. I could see it now, a hooded figure, its face hidden in darkness, exuding a palpable aura of dread. I was trapped. In a frantic rush, I turned to the window, but it was sealed tight. The figure continued its approach, each step sending tremors of fear coursing through me. I felt my back press against the wall, the cold reality setting in. I was completely alone, and this was no ordinary encounter. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted toward the back of the lab, searching for an escape. My mind raced with questions. What did this figure want? Was it connected to Jason's disappearance? The air felt heavy, suffocating, as I frantically searched for an exit. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, The figure vanished. The room returned to its oppressive silence, leaving me gasping for breath. I stood frozen, staring into the emptiness, disbelief and terror mixing in my chest. Had I imagined it? Was it a trick of the mind? My heart raced, and I bolted for the door, throwing it open. The hallway was dark, the dim lights flickering ominously. I sprinted down the corridor, fear propelling me forward, the weight of the mystery gnawing at my insides. As I burst through the front doors, the cool night air hit me like a wave. But the feeling of dread lingered. Jason was still missing, and whatever dark force had claimed him had just shown me its hand. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now entangled in something much larger than myself. The whispers would continue, the legend of Jason's disappearance growing with each passing day. I knew one thing for certain. The shadows lurking within Willow Creek High held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. And I was far from finished unraveling this chilling tale.